shine, dreams of night unwind, till King's coffee grind, kickstart heart and mind, roasted beans so fine, aromatic line, pour it and stay a while, sips that make you smile, till King's blend it better, sip the stream, feel lighter, morning bliss, let's burn.
Ever feel like you're just like drowning in coffee choices? You're staring at the wall of bags at the store, and you just have no idea which one is actually going to give you like a really good strong cup.
Oh, I totally get that, yeah. Everyone's promising the strongest brew, right? But like nobody actually tells you how to get there.
Exactly. And that's actually what we're diving into today. It was your request to kind of decode what makes a truly great strong cup of coffee. And it turns out there are a few myths that we need to bust along the way. Starting with this whole idea of coffee having a strength rating. Where do we even begin with that?
You know, right? It's almost funny how often people will just like immediately connect dark roast with a stronger coffee. And it's not that simple.
Yeah, this article from Two Kings Coffee, it points out that a dark roast can actually sometimes mean less flavor, not more. Something to do with the acids in the beans.
Yeah, totally. So think of it this way. Those acids are actually like the carriers for all the good stuff, like your chocolatey notes, your fruity hints, even those like delicate floral aromas. And when you roast those beans super dark, you're essentially like burning away all those acids. So instead of a more intense flavor, you might just end up with something really muddled, almost like a dirty tasting cup.
So it's like burning your toast, basically. Just because it's darker doesn't mean it tastes better. Makes you wonder why anyone roasts their beans dark.
Right. Well, I mean, some people, they really enjoy those smoky, almost like charcoal-like flavors, the kind of thing that you get from a really dark roast. But it's just important to remember that the dark roasting itself doesn't equal strength in terms of flavor. It's really just a different flavor profile.
Okay, so if it's not the roast, what about the type of bean? I know we've at least all heard of Arabica and Robusta beans, but how do those play into this whole strength equation?
Ah, yes, the classic coffee bean showdown. So while roasting plays a huge role, the type of bean you use can definitely have an impact too. Mainly when it comes to caffeine. So Robusta beans, for instance, they're known for packing a serious caffeine punch. Sometimes almost like double the amount you'd find in your average Arabica bean.
So that's why my energy drinks send me into orbit. They're probably just loaded with Robusta.
Yeah. Most likely. It's a popular choice for things like instant coffee and energy drinks because, well, that extra caffeine, it's a big selling point. But it does come with a bit of a trade-off.
There's always a trade-off. What's the downside to all that caffeine?
Well, some people don't mind it. Robusta beans, they tend to have a much harsher, almost more bitter taste compared to Arabica. Think burnt rubber rather than smooth and chocolatey. Not exactly the most inviting flavor profile.
Definitely not what I want in my morning cup. You're saying if I want a smoother, more flavorful experience, Arabica beans are the way to go.
If flavor is your priority, then yeah, absolutely. And it seems like the folks over at Two Kings Coffee agree. They actually exclusively use high-quality Arabica beans in all of their blends.
Interesting. So they're really focusing on those more complex flavors, rather than just chasing the biggest caffeine hit.
Yeah.
But I'm still curious, if most Arabica beans have like pretty similar caffeine levels, how do you actually choose one that's going to deliver the most flavor? Is it all just trial and error?
I mean, there's definitely some experimentation involved, which is part of the fun of it all. But here's the thing. The real key to unlocking those incredible coffee flavors, it's all in the brewing process itself.
Okay, so there's more to it than just dumping some grounds in a filter and hoping for the best. So tell me more. What else is there?
Well, let's just say there's a reason why people get really, really into their brewing methods. It all comes down to something called extraction.
Extraction. Sounds intense. Am I going to need like a chemistry degree to understand my coffee now?
Not at all. It's actually pretty simple. Extraction is basically just the process of pulling those like delicious flavor compounds. You're pulling them out of the coffee grounds and into your cup.
Okay, so I'm like coaxing the flavor out, kind of.
Exactly. It's like you're unlocking all those hidden depths of the bean.
I like that. I like how you put that. So it's not just about the bean itself, but like how much of its flavor I'm actually getting out when I'm brewing it.
Yeah.
And I know this article mentions something about under extraction and over extraction. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. It's all about finding kind of like a sweet spot. Under extraction, that happens when you don't brew the coffee long enough.
Yep.
So you're leaving Like a lot of that really good flavor, it's still trapped in those coffee grounds. You'll definitely know if you've under-extracted when you taste it. The coffee's going to taste really weak, really thin, and almost like sour in a way.
So I'm basically robbing myself of all the good flavor by not brewing it long enough.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay, and then what about the opposite? Like, what happens if I over-extract?
That's when you venture into bitter territory. Over extraction, it's kind of like, when you leave your toast in the toaster a little too long, and instead of getting that nice, like, nuanced flavor, you just get this really harsh, burnt taste that kind of, like, overpowers everything. And the coffee might even have kind of a weird, almost oily texture to it.
So both extremes sound kind of bad. Like,
yeah.
one is weak and disappointing, and then the other one is bitter and burnt. So how do I find that sweet spot in the middle?
Right. Well, that's where all those brewing variables that we talked about earlier come in. The grind size, the ratio of coffee to water, the temperature of the water, and of course, the brew time. Each one of those has a really big impact on how your coffee actually extracts.
It really is like a recipe then. Too much of this, not enough of that, and suddenly I'm not just making coffee anymore. I'm running a science experiment in my kitchen. Maybe this is why I just stick to my French press. It's simple. Although maybe I should pay more attention to my grind size.
Even just like small tweaks can make a really big difference in the cup. And don't worry, it doesn't have to be overly complicated. Like a good starting point is making sure that your grinder is set right for whatever brewing method you're using. So for a French press, you'd want a coarser grind compared to, say, like a drip coffee maker.
Okay, that makes sense. Coarser for French press, finer for drip. I'm going to write this down. Okay, so what about these other variables like water temperature? Brew time.
Yeah, so water temperature is super important for good extraction. You ideally want it to be somewhere between like 195 and 205 degrees Fahrenheit. So a good thermometer is going to be your best friend there. As for brew time, it can really depend on the method, but a good rule of thumb for most methods is around like 4 minutes total brew time, give or take.
All right, this is good. I'm feeling like I can actually do this now. Like I'm armed with my thermometer. I've got my extraction knowledge. I'm ready. Bring on all the coffee.
That's the spirit. And just remember, it's all about, experimenting a little bit and seeing what tastes best to you and what works best with your equipment.
Speaking of taste, this article did mention some beans that are known for their really incredible flavor. And, we've got to talk about those.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah, there's a whole world of coffee flavors out there just waiting to be discovered.
I am here for it. Sign me up. So this article mentioned Kenyan, Tanzanian, Monsoon Malabar AA, Guatemalan, Ethiopian, Nicaraguan, Colombian, and Sumatran. Where do we even start with a list like that?
Well, that's the beauty of it, right? There's something for everyone. But if you're looking for a really, truly unique and flavorful coffee experience, I would have to recommend trying an Ethiopian Yirgacheffe.
Ethiopian Yirgacheffe. That sounds kind of magical. What makes it so special?
It's truly in a category of its own. Ethiopian coffees are already famous for being like super bright and acidic, and they've got these really complex flavor profiles. But Yirgacheffe, it stands out even among those.
Okay, so what am I in for if I brew a cup of this Yirgacheffe?
Okay, imagine this. You get these delicate floral aromas, almost like you're walking through a garden after it rains, And then you get these hints of citrus, like a little lemon zest, maybe even a touch of bergamot. And then finally, this incredible sweetness that kind of lingers on your palate, like wildflower honey or maybe candied citrus peel.
Wow. Okay. That seriously sounds like an explosion of flavor. Like, I can't believe that one kind of bean can have that complex of a flavor profile. It's a far cry from burnt rubber, that's for sure.
It really is. And, that's what makes exploring these single-origin Arabica beans so great. There's so many different flavors to discover.
It's kind of funny,
Yeah.
because I started this whole deep dive thinking that strong coffee just meant more caffeine, but I was missing out on a whole world of flavor.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that mindset. But once you start to pay attention to, the roast level, the extraction, and like the unique traits of the different beans, then all of a sudden strong can take on a whole new meaning.
This has been so eye-opening. So we busted the myth of coffee strength. We talked about Arabica versus Robusta, and we took a deep dive on extraction.
Oh.
I feel like I'm ready to tackle any coffee out there now.
And that's what it's all about. Remember that Ethiopian Yirgacheffe we were talking about? It's a really great starting point, but don't be afraid to experiment with different roasts, even within that single origin,
Oh, it's interesting. So even with the same bean, like with Yirgacheffe, you can roast it differently.
Yeah.
And it will drastically change the flavor.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Like a lighter roast might bring out those more delicate floral and citrus notes, whereas a medium roast that might lean more towards those chocolate and caramel flavors.
I love that. So it's almost like fine-tuning an instrument to get the perfect sound.
That's a great way to put it.
It seems like, the real takeaway here is to maybe ditch the idea of strength and instead just embrace the whole journey of exploring all these cool coffee flavors.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to try new things.
Well said. And on that note, I think I'm going to go brew a cup of that Ethiopian yirgacheffe.
Morning light come shine.
Thanks for joining us on this delicious deep dive, everyone. I don't know about you, but I know I learned a lot.
Kicked our heart and mind. Roasted beans so fine. Aromatic line. Pour it and stay a while. Sips that make you smile.